Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, I guess, is part 2 of this exploration of the fluid watercolor cold press block paper, the 6 by 8 inches. I was told about it by Joe Menza, and he pointed out that a Instagram painter who paints in gouache and does plein air, Mr. Tommy Kim, utilizes it as well. So looking at the price on Amazon, I was inspired to pick it up and try it out. And now that Omelette Fest and other things are out of the way, I'm kind of inspired to just get a lot more painting in and explore potential opportunities in plein air painting. So in the first video, we looked at burnt umber. We used just the small squirrel mop, thinking that this one will use the raw umber, and we'll use this fan brush and just kind of seeing what can be put together, what could be used for a plein air palette, and just getting ideas. Because with plein air painting, if I get into it, I really don't want to be at the point where I have a whole bunch of stuff that I bring out with me, a whole bunch of tubes of paint, different brushes, papers, etc. So the scene's going to be imaginary, but we're going to see what we can do with the fan brush, how the paper holds up, and how the raw umber is. Now, one of the things that will cause issues is the fact that I'm painting indoors. And down here in Louisiana, whenever I had tried painting outside in the past, the paper dries very, very quickly. So eventually explorations with a spray bottle, which I had filled up yesterday but didn't wind up using, will probably have to take place, as well as maybe an easier way to coat the paper with water. A spray bottle might suffice in that regard as well. I really prefer minimalist palettes, and I really enjoy monochromatic painting. So burnt umber and raw umber could easily be two paints, one for kind of a warm painting, the burnt umber, then the raw umber for cooler painting. So just a whole bunch of different ideas. Obviously the texture of the fan brush is going to be a little bit different. On the squirrel mop, we had more of a kind of a lowercase n shape, just kind of hooped mound. Here we have a wider one. Mr. Tommy Kim uses a fan brush, and his fan brush looks like totally used to way past the end of its life, but he is definitely a master of it and achieves phenomenal effects. So reconstituting from the palette is working quite well with this. We're getting quite dark already, so that's a really good positive thing, that maybe taking a tube of paint out isn't necessary. Just putting a dry dollop on your on my palette would be the way to go. And the same thing happened with the burnt umber yesterday. So it's an imaginary scene, very easy to repeat scenes. So trying to avoid that. It almost feels like the fan brush is looser. One thing that did really hit me, what'd you knock over, bud? One thing that did get me yesterday was the fact that the paper's 6x8, which is fine, but if it was to be matted, it would be 5x7, and it really cropped my image quite a bit. So maybe guidelines in the sense of what you see Mr. Frankie Clark doing on the edges would be beneficial. Usually I'm painting on a quarter sheet, which is 11 by 15, and when you mat it, you really don't lose too much. So honestly, this down here would get lost. Let's maybe throw a little bit in the sky. I really like the texture of this paper. It is, for me, kind of just non-repetitive. Sometimes paper textures are just a little too predictable. We should definitely explore all the possibilities and marks of the fan brush. This is a cheap Hobby Lobby Master Touch one. I haven't really used much paper towel, but let's kind of throw in texture. We can scrape. I always mention Mr. Mark that sent me these homemade tools that he made for scraping. Yeah, that's Percy. The cats have been doing a lot of going in the other room and crying, and I'm not sure why they do that. Or I'll be laying in bed and they'll walk right past me, go into the bathroom, and start crying in the bathroom. I'm like, Hammy, Percy, I'm right here. I did place an order from Blick because they have a sale where it's $50 and free shipping. For the slightly larger pad, I wanted to try that to see how that compares and if that buckles or causes any issues. I kind of have this notion that a larger pad, larger paper might buckle, so we'll see. They apparently make 100% cotton one. I think it's Fluid 100. And it was kind of the cheapest of the cotton pads, but I shied away from that, mainly just in terms of you know, trying other things and limiting art expenditures. I do take the funds from the Etsy and the Patreon and all those donations to purchase all these things and these experiments, so I really appreciate all your support in that regard. Pushing back and forth and just playing around Let's see, on the last one we used a razor blade, so here we'll use one as well. If you do use a razor blade, please be careful. Experiment with the different types of marks and scrapes you can get. Here's just using that sharp kind of corner, and I'm going wet and wet. And I don't know if it's scraping the paper as much as moving some of the pigment around, which is fine. It'll obviously scrape differently whenever the paper is dry. One thing that surprised me about the paper was its ability to take harsh scrapings and then for me to come back and paint over it. I did utilize cutting with the razor blade a lot in the previous, and we can compare these two to kind of get an idea. I'm going to pause and do a dry off. However, during the dry off, I think it loosens or tightens up and pulls the glue. So it's glued at the top and the bottom, not on the sides. I'm not really a block painting person, so I've never used glue on all four sides, so I'm not really sure if that would help keep it down. And of course, out in the field, I wouldn't be using a blow dryer. So I'm going to pause it, we'll blow dry, and most likely you'll see some of it lift. All right, it did not peel up. I did try to keep the blow dryer a little bit higher, like a distance away from the paper and the glue. Let's see. I mentioned in the previous video that if you were to follow Carson's Guide to Landscape Painting, he has this Carson's theory of angles. The sky, the light source, is going to be the brightest, the whitest, or the lowest in tone, while vertical objects are often your darkest. And that rule seems to be broken a lot in tonalism or in these kind of fast and loose approaches. But don't get me wrong, Carson's Guide to Landscape Painting is absolutely fantastic. My one gripe, which I think I had expressed in the past, not in the previous video, but just previous ones, is that there's a lot of focus on tonal value, which is absolutely perfect because that's what I love. And the sky would be lightest, the ground would be second most, and then the trees would be darkest vertical objects. But the book is just completely filled with paintings of snow scenes, which just completely go against, you know, they break that kind of rule. So I needed more examples of his paintings that had that his application. With these background trees, there's a painter that I'm thinking of, and I gotta think of his name. It's gonna come, Roland Hilder, and he put a few books out in the market. Unfortunately, he's deceased, and I have one or two of the books, but there's ones that I kind of really wanted, but I just couldn't get, or just they're a little too expensive secondhand. But the way he did his trees are just absolutely fantastic, and I would We'll have to figure out how he did them. I don't know if the books mention that or not. I think Colin Woodward was doing very similar trees to how Roland Hilder was. So I'm gonna have to ask Colin. I believe he was a British landscape painter. It's fun. You can definitely see the way this brush influences the painting, the fan brush. You can almost develop your own style based off of whatever brush you're choosing to play around with. And I'll mention Mr. Tommy Kim again on Instagram, how he uses the fan brush with the gouache, but he paints, uses it almost kind of in a block aspect, almost like a flat. So even though a brush might appear for like one use, there are a lot of different textures you can get out of it. We can explore our straight lines. Well, let's see if I could throw some heavy pigment. There we go. Try to let the bristles catch, while also just kind of creating the illusion of small branches. It's not something I do, but you can see the potential for that there. I should say, of course, you're always welcome to follow along with anything that I do. And you're always welcome to sign your own name to anything you do whenever you follow along. And you have my express permission to sell anything whenever you follow along. I want you guys to be successful, to have money for art supplies, and to have fun. I don't want the fan brush marks to be too obvious. I'm trying to break it up a little bit. And of course, if you like this content, I have exclusive stuff and early access on the Patreon down below. Thank you to all the Patreon supporters and people that send the super thanks on YouTube. That really helps. Like I mentioned earlier, I put it towards these different art supplies. And of course, liking, subscribing, and sharing helps too. Also, if you follow along, I would love to see your results. Or a lot of people will share, tag me and stuff that they say, kind of inspired by me, which is like just such a huge compliment for somebody to say something like that. So I really appreciate that, and you're always welcome to tag me and show me what you do, because I would love to see it. I always try to mention all the artists that I'm inspired by. I don't want to take any credit, and I want to give credit where credit's due. And if I don't mention somebody, I apologize. Even though this one isn't inspired by Dennis Sheehan or Stuart Davies, I feel like I should still say their names for this. I always say them and Stephen Cronin and David Usher and Alan Owen, all the people that got me into fast and loose watercolor painting. Mr. Henry Lee, who got me into the Chinese brush painting. I would love to interview him. I called up his shop one day. He's Blue Heron Arts, because I needed some supplies when I was doing the Chinese brush painting. And lo and behold, he was the one that answered the phone, and it was kind of like the term would be like a fanboy type moment, where it was just like, you know, you're like talking to a great. So this one, fan brush, finger, razor blade. We could see what else we can do with the razor blade with it. Burnt umber, excuse me, we know that we can pull, sorry, raw umber, we know we could pull that out. Kind of scrub and lift, at least move some things around and soften some edges. But so far, both are winners. Let me pause, dry off, and we'll see. All right, so we did get the glue to come up, which is fine. Like I said, eventually it'll be used in the field and we'll see what happens there. A few other things that I feel like I should mention. I want to explore some other brushes and just have like a very minimal amount and kind of just come up with that palette that works for me. So far, the razor blade, like I don't use razor blade all the time with watercolor painting, but it's just working very well with these small scenes. So I think a razor blade would be helpful. Also, I think razor blades are usually what's recommended, that small knife to loosen the glue. So let me know down below what other brushes you'd like me to experiment with, and if I have them on hand, I'll utilize them. Let's compare this alongside with burnt umber. And we're going to have two variables here now. So we have raw umber and our fan brush, burnt umber, and squirrel mop. We have the cooler tone. I would say raw umber I associate with green. For me, that's just a natural green, where the burnt umber is on the redder side and the warmer side. And you could probably play with the mood just with those two combinations right there. So we'll continue with these experiments. Let me know what brushes you'd like to see. Let me know if there's any pigments you'd like to see. And I'll just keep plugging along. So I hope you enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all your support. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Take care.